whatever it is that God has put on your life, I'm telling you right now, by the Spirit of the Lord, that you are not done, that you have not been passed over, and that there is still purpose and there is still destiny in your bones. If dry bones can live and become an army, those who which have flesh can rise up in their calling and their anointing and take on a new mantle. Most people are too busy complaining about in the position of where they're at, but it's the pressure that makes the diamond. It's the friction and being uncomfortable and the constant irritation that creates the pearl. I'd hate to be a pearl inside of a clam. Like constantly just, I'm agitated all the time. Oh, wait, now I'm a pearl. Clam, oyster, whatever. I ate SpongeBob. I don't know. But I do know that God wants to bring breakthrough in this hour. He wants to bring transformation in your life. You serve the God of breakthrough. That He has desired for you to be the head and not the tail. To be above and not beneath. That you should not want anything. Because He shall provide. Because He is your Father. And He says that His voice will go over.
Well, hey, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, tomorrow, yesterday, if you're somewhere where it's yesterday, I don't know. Anyways, today is the day where we talk about maturing in the prophetic, not just like how to give words or how to receive words. I mean, I'm sure people would love a class on how to receive words. How do you sit inside of a conference and pull on people to actually give you a prophetic word? First, you need a rain stick. I'm watching Steven in the background, and you know what? It's more fun if he's on the broadcast laughing at what I'm saying. Let's just bring him in right now and do that. Oh, I removed him from the stream. Nope, I added him back on.
Nope, you got me. You're in.
All right, we're in.
I'm out.
So first you need a rain stick when you're trying to get people to give you a prophetic word at a conference. You want to make sure that you're drawing attention to yourself in some fashion. I suggest the rain stick like Rafiki from Lion King. And go, correction, I know your father. But it doesn't matter. It's in the past. And so...
Oh boy, it's a festive atmosphere in here this morning already, or
right?
this afternoon, or wherever you are.
Is there anywhere where it's yesterday? I don't think so. I think we're all today or tomorrow.
Yes, I think you're right.
Anyhow, so, but no, I'm excited. Tuesdays have now become the day where we talk about growing in the prophetic, not just being prophetic, not just like I have a vision, I have a dream. Like, what are you, Martin Luther King? And so, dear God help me.
Yeah.
I haven't even had that much coffee, but it's going to be awesome because I'm learning a lot from listening to Steven because he has just like tons of experience and knowledge and just walking with the Lord, which basically means we've made a bunch of mistakes.
Yes.
And we've learned from them. And that's how we grow, is by going out and doing stuff. And then eventually the Lord says, hey, that's not what I was trying to have you do. I'm going to need you to stop doing that. You're actually you're not actually being prophetic anymore.
Yes.
You're this close to be like stepping into witchcraft now, or whatever it might be. Like,
or two steps too far. Please step back.
Yes, exactly. I need at least 6 feet distance between you guys, between the prophetic and between witchcraft. No one can see me because we're half screened. I need at least 6 feet between witchcraft and the prophetic. Thank you.
Yes, you're gonna have to keep your hands close to talk in the screen today. So
I know.
In order to air traffic control, you're going to need to keep them right here.
Like a Tyrannosaurus. Like, I don't know if this is thought out, boss. Big head, little arms.
Absolutely.
The fact that I know so many kids' movies is kind of frightening to me. Or it makes sense.
That's right. Just being a good steward of what you've been given,
Exactly. You know what? We need to social distance between witchcraft and the prophetic.
You should tweet that, but keep it with your name attached to it, not mine, please.
I don't have to. It's right there. But that would involve me actually using my Twitter, so that's a different story.
Yeah.
I
I
I
know.
don't know the last time I've tweeted. Actually, I take that back. The only time I tweet anything is when other people tweet me.
There you
So
go.
and then I retweet them.
There
But
you go.
but anyhow, well, how's it going in South Carolina? Aren't you guys open for business now?
We are. We are. Yesterday, they are allowing 50% capacity in restaurants.
Oh,
So
that's nice.
yeah, and I've heard that maybe next week I might actually be able to get a haircut again. So I took matters into my own hands, and now I'm growing that back out because I could not wait any longer. So thankfully, in a couple more weeks, we'll be able to fix this thing, and I won't have to do it myself again.
I won't mention how I had a haircut.
Black market haircuts. Who ever thought that 2020 would bring in black market haircuts?
It was more like a speakeasy haircut
Yeah, there you
because
go.
people had to knock 3 times and then give me a password,
Yeah,
and then I was like, "All right, here's the cover charge."
I know.
And so this is already 12 ways of ridiculous.
Knock 3 times.
And I forgot to turn down the volume of my phone. There's an echo.
I love it.
Uh,
Deja vu. Here we go.
but we are only allowed 25% open, and but we are getting there. We're actually we had church service outside on Sunday with Brad, like the first one, and like the whole side of my head, like this whole side right here. I forget I'm reverse, and so the whole side of my head is completely sunburnt right now from sitting in the sun. And I got like some weird like because I was wearing Oakleys, so I have like that weird like block sunburn type thing going on. Like, man, I was like, I should have worn normal sunglasses.
There's
But
things you never think about until that leads
until
us
you
to
get
our
sunburned.
that leads us to our first point. You don't know what you don't know, right?
Exactly.
So I think we need to understand that the Lord does not hold us accountable to the things that He hasn't shown us yet. But once He reveals that thing to us, then we have been given personal responsibility to actually walk that thing out in the new understanding that we have.
That's
Right?
good.
So that you and I know, as far as human behavior goes, we try to escape personal responsibility at all costs. Right? We try to put things on the Lord that are actually He's given to us. And there's this concept of basically if the Lord makes me do it, or the Lord made me do it, or we have these physical manifestations or these things that we do, but the Holy Spirit made me do it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And we can
I got
we
a
can
ton of them going through my head right now.
right. And it's the Holy Spirit made me do it. And so then we end up trying to make it like the Lord robotically controls us. And so if it happens, we blame it on the Lord, or but we don't really have sovereignty over our own spirit or over our own soul to have to step into things that He's inviting us into. We feel like just because He may have spoken it, that means it's automatically going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, that's typically our rundown for it is the Lord had made me do it, and whether it's being like no, Becky, the Lord did not make you blow that shofar when it was dead silent.
Thank you.
Or no, Tommy, the Lord did not make you offbeat with that tambourine. Um,
Right.
these are the things that are going through my head right now. The Lord
Yeah.
did not make you hit me in the eye with your. But the reality is like a lot of, and I say those things jokingly, but
Sure.
but I mean, as running a ministry school and being involved in the development of people growing in the Lord, there's a lot of things. Like I remember one time, you'll appreciate this. So I gave an assignment, and it was a relatively simple assignment, and the assignment I had given the whole class was to do like a 2 to 3 minute video on Facebook of your testimony. Fairly simple. And these are, it's a ministry school. These are people that are aspiring to become in ministry. And I'm like, if you can't get in front of a camera, what are you going to do in front of people?
Sure.
And so after the assignment was due, I said, hey, you didn't do this. And the person came to me and said, oh, the Lord spoke to me and told me I didn't have to do it. which then turns into that fun conversation of going, really? The Lord spoke to you and told you you didn't have to do what I'm asking in this class.
Yes. There's no telling how many times that happens. There's no telling. It's as if the Lord...
I wonder if that works with like the IRS.
No.
No, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't. It does not. But that's part of... So our typical default is if we don't understand something or if we don't want to participate in something, then we go back to Isaiah and we say, well, his ways are not our ways and his thoughts are not our thoughts, right? They're higher than mine. We can't understand them. The mind of God, who can know it, right? And we use Isaiah as our foundation to pull away from having to actually wrestle or digest and start to comprehend something that we don't, right? The problem with that is that in the New Testament, Paul comes along and says, now we have the mind of Christ, right? So Paul's trying to show us the invitation that if the Spirit's inside of us, this is what is the available to us. This is the invitation. So the invitation is not to rely on Isaiah 55, which is, that's true. His ways are not our ways and his thoughts are not our thoughts, which actually puts the responsibility on us that if one of us isn't thinking like the other, which one is wrong?
Right.
Right? I promise you, he's never wrong. He's never seeing it the wrong way. So if we're not lined up in seeing it the way that he sees it, if we're not able to describe it the way that he describes it, then one of us needs to change, and it's not the Lord. Right? So if we're growing and we're changing and we find ourselves, as we grow in the prophetic, which is what this one we're starting to get closer to our topic, right? So
eventually,
if we're maturing in our growth in the prophetic, then we first need to understand we don't see things the way that he sees things by default. This is not something where you wake up and you're actually thinking the way that the Lord is thinking.
Yeah.
Romans says that the carnal mind is at enmity with the Spirit, right? So our default mode with our natural mind, the way that we naturally think about things, is not the way the Lord would think about things, right? Here's a relevant current example, just a small example of we don't naturally see things the way that he sees things, right? So Costco, right? If you want to go to Costco right now, you have to wear a mask, right? And not only, but they're handing out masks at the beginning, at the entrance, right?
That's nice of them.
But the first thought for certain people, because of freedom and justice and all that kind of stuff, is, hey, Costco can't tell us that we have to wear a mask. Everybody should call and cancel your Costco membership so that they understand they can't push us around, right? That seems like taking a stand for truth. That seems like taking a stand for justice, but it doesn't come anywhere close to the way justice and truth is seen from the Lord's perspective. No. Right? It would be persecution if not only did you have to wear a mask if you went to Costco, but you can only shop at Costco, right? If they told you this is where you're going to shop and this is the only place you're allowed to shop and you have to do these things in order to shop, then maybe you can start to play the repressed, persecuted style card, right? But if we flipped that narrative, and this, I know this will just, sadly, it'll ruffle some feathers, but this is just how it is, right? This is, if we're going to mature and grow in the prophetic, we really have to start understanding how we're living in the natural, which then we can leave that and go to a higher plane, which is to see it the way that he sees it, right?
Right.
If you flipped it and now Costco decided that they were going to donate all of their charity money to pro-life organizations, right? Then the same people that are going to make the boycott campaign would all of a sudden try to convince all of their friends to only shop at Costco because they're standing for morality the way that we think they should. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me.
It's as if God's heart towards Costco has changed based on the behavior of Costco.
The conditions.
Right. And if we believe that God's heart towards somebody or a corporation or a church or a city or you fill in the blank, if we fundamentally believe that the Lord's heart changes in the way that we treat those people based on their behavior, then we are still in a religious works-based mentality rather than understanding the unconditional love of the Lord.
Wow.
Now start to think how much we still have to unwind from our own brains in order to be able to mature to truly reveal his love to ourselves and to other people.
Yeah.
Because we've been inundated with this stuff since the time we were born, right? I mean, in the education system, we're trained, if you do well, you get a gold star. If you're bad enough, you get the dunce cap and you sit in the corner facing, you're isolated from
what
everybody.
What school did you go to?
This is before my time, man. I'm not that old, but I'm just saying. This is when corporal punishment was still allowed.
This is before my time. Before my time.
But I've studied history, right? I know what this whole thing's about. So, no, but you have this system from the time that you're in our education system, right? Think about it. It's all about if you do well enough to be noticed, or if you do poorly enough to be noticed, you get special attention. But if you fly nondescript or under the radar, the vast majority of people just go through and they're never highlighted, whether it be a highlight towards a good thing or highlight towards a bad thing. So the same thing is happening when we go out there with our discernment. We're naturally our brains are naturally pulling things that are much better than we think they are. They draw our attention, and things that are much worse than we think they should be, those draw our attention. And we end up getting overly focused on the really good things that we think are really good and the really bad things. And then we find ourselves taking bites of the tree of knowledge of good and evil because we think we understand the things that the Lord likes and the things that he doesn't like.
Well, it all comes back to, we think that we understand exactly what the Lord wants.
Absolutely.
I don't know how we came up with this mindset.
But even right now, you and I sitting here doing this broadcast, knowing that we don't know what the Lord wants, right? There's still a
it's incredible amounts of irony of like, and I think about it every time. Like, there's probably at least 300 Facebook statuses I've never actually fully put into action because I myself could not stand that irony.
Right.
I couldn't, and it's always funny is like, it's kind of like in the moment of like when we are literally in the moment of going, God is not for this, blah, blah, blah. And the problem with church is more people know what the church is against than what they're for. We're literally like contradicting our own statements, our own selves in the midst of that whole situation. Very much like, we're like, we got to love with no expectation. And then, but I'm telling you right now, if you take Merry Christmas off of my coffee cup, I'm boycotting you right now.
Right, man. People, when we talked a little bit about this via text, we like to see judgment and justice on other people.
As long as it's not us, like you said. We're like some weird. We become like some weird glutton.
Sorry, somebody tried to call me.
I know how that's. We become some type of weird glutton for punishment, where we want to see these things like happen, and it's to a degree it's fun. It's not funny. It's saddening how often we see when like the same people that will say like, I just can't handle the church, or the church it's too religious, and then like you get them involved in the prophetic and they want to see the hammer. They want to see the hammer of God come down on stuff and on people, and I'm like, whoa. You were just telling me you thought things were too religious and too critical and too judgmental. What about the mercy of the Lord? you know?
Yeah, it would always confuse me and make me feel compassion. We would have people come in for prophetic ministry over the years, and you would be sitting there and you would be sharing what you felt like was the Lord's heart for them and all this kind of stuff, and you could tell that it wasn't really landing right.
Yeah.
You've learned, you understand how to read people at this point. We talked about that a little bit last week. You can just see that it's not resonating with them during this time, right? And then at the end, when you give them like 1 minute to, if they want to ask any questions about what they've heard or whatever, you would invariably hear something like, well, all that encouragement is great and stuff, but what corrections does the Lord want me to make during this time?
That's to me, that's crazy, because that's something I've never sought out. I've just found people so willingly to give it to me.
Sure.
I've been, anyways, but
it shows
weird.
how it shows that we've been ingrained that the Lord can't possibly be happy with us the way that we are,
right.
or we may reach a level of acceptance with him, but in order to fully be loved and accepted and embraced or championed by him, we have to change A, B, C, and D first. And then we get into that system where we misquote John 3:30. I've heard this, the religious system just flips this thing around, and it's a fundamental difference, even though it's only a few words. It says, John says, he must increase, I must decrease, right? And
Yeah.
I've been in meetings where it's actually been misquoted the opposite way with I must decrease, he must increase. And if you think that the decrease has to happen first, then you'll always be frustrated and bewildered and never feel like you're making progress, because the only way for you to decrease is for him to first increase in your life. Mm. And so if we find ourselves navel gazing and being self-focused and trying to figure out, what can I rid myself of? What can I liberate? How can I get deliverance? How can I get freedom from this thing? How can I get out of this addiction? If we don't focus on the Lord and understand that what we behold, we become, that we're transformed as we gaze on him, then as he pours into us, it actually pushes out the stuff that we've always wanted to be free from anyway, right? But it comes from a completely different perspective of understanding his goodness, understanding that it's the kindness of the Lord that leads us to repentance. It's not him up there with a stick whacking us every time we get out of line. It's actually him pulling us out of the mud with a smile on his face, knowing, man, they've learned that lesson now. They probably won't end up in that ditch again anymore. And that to him is actually a sign of growth and progress.
Yeah. I think it's just our ideas of like a father and what he's wanting to do. I always look at it like, I don't have kids, so it's like I've never been in that experience of like disciplining my child.
Sure.
But I've been in the position of disciplining some children. And so, right. And I always find it like interesting, like, you would be merciful to your own child. Why are we so abusive towards each other in the body? And why are we using this tool, this gift that is to convey his heart, to do that? That's like saying, like, I'm going to use coffee to make you go to sleep. I guess for some people it does work, but that's not the point. Ignore that fact.
That's right.
But you get what I'm saying. It's like, I'm using something that's supposed to do this to make you do this, but how are we doing that? Why are we doing that? And like, when we look at, like, especially the New Testament definition of the prophetic, to encourage, to exhort, to build up, to edify, nowhere in that does it say, come with a baseball bat, beat down, destroy, expose, manipulate, X, Y, and Z. However, then we get that argument, well, in the Old Testament, And it's like, well, then we're missing. I think it's almost like we're missing the father in the Old Testament of what he's really saying, of how he's trying to communicate. Like, hey, you know what? Like, what you're doing right now is clearly not working out for you. Why don't you come home and let's figure this out? It's, to me, it's like, with, and maybe tell me if I'm wrong, because like, tell me if there's correction I need. But to me, I look at it as very much like the prodigal son in those situations. Dad's up in heaven looking out for when his children are coming back because he wants to meet them down the road so they don't get beat up in the process. But we go, well, no, God's over there with a hammer smithing people. And I'm like, I don't see that. I see a loving father going, you are not doing this the way that you could be. There is so much potential in your life right now, and you're living so below it. Come home.
Absolutely. I mean, I love that. I love the thought of that story. You can't. That father had influence. He had wealth, right? He had the means. At any point, he could have controlled the situation and sent servants out to go locate his son and bring him home.
Yeah.
At any point, but once he had freely given, right? It says it's for freedom that he set us free, right? Which
yeah,
I couldn't do that. It's very hard, even in limited fashions, to truly liberate someone just so that they can be free, not so that they can appreciate what I've done.
Yeah.
Right. And so the definition of for freedom setting you free is there's no expectation that you will ever come back and bring something from your side to balance out the scales of who did more for each other.
Exactly.
Right. And so, but at the same time, the Lord, even though it's excruciatingly painful to watch his son go through this process of having to go through the mud, it's changed my prayer life for people. Honestly, there are times when, as harsh as it may seem, or as hard as it may feel, my prayer for those people is, Lord, help them bottom out quickly. Mm-hmm. Right? Because there is a transformation that takes place when you come to the end of yourself and say, you know what? Even if it's not like it used to be, it'll still be better than where I'm at right now. And when you make that shift and you decide to say, all the lifelines that I've tried instead of the Lord, I'm going to try the Lord this time, then you see the Lord. He sees the first turn that you make. It says, while he was still a long way off, right? Now this turn has happened. There's a sense of, as I draw near to you, you're going to draw near to me. And so we see that lived out in that example. As soon as clarity came, as soon as that son said, man, I'm going to make a return, and he makes a commitment, all of a sudden the father just comes in and goes, you know what? This isn't a 50-50 proposition. This isn't you meet me halfway, I meet you halfway. This is, man, you make the smallest turn towards me and I'm coming the rest of the way. Yeah. And that's what we have to capture when we're prophesying to people, when we're ministering to people. We have to capture the heart behind, if they make the smallest turn, all of heaven is championing and cheering them as if they've already made it to the finish line.
Yeah. I love that. That's like people, like one of the things I see this kind of like an invisible war that takes place on social media, because you get a lot of people that are constantly going like, I want a word, I need encouragement, and then you see this other side of, you should never like stop going and stop asking, stop enabling people, and I'm all like, my first and foremost message is always go towards the Lord. Go towards the Lord. But if someone, I don't know what's going on in their life, but if they come to me, or they come on, my broadcast and go, man, I need a word. I look at it, it's the same way. I once had someone break into my car, and I still don't know what they stole to this day. But if I look at it, if somebody is in such a place of desperation, that they are willing to go to that extreme, they clearly are in need of something. And I look at it as if somebody says, hey, Wesley, like, I really could use some encouragement. There's something going on in their life where they're willing to publicly admit, like, hey, I'm in a place of where I need a little bit of, like, oomph to get to that next place. And who am I to say and to back down on that person? Mm-hmm. But I'm like, well, one, like, I want to connect you to the Father. But part of understanding that is prophetic ministry is to reveal Jesus, and the only way to the Father is through Jesus. Mm-hmm. I'm building the bridge, and part of that process, and I think we get to a point of where we just, like, it really comes back to, like, because, like, it's when we understand the processes of the Father, we're willing to not understand it, but I think it's when we come closer into the spirit of adoption, we see how the Father really responds to his children. And I think that's one of the, like, I don't care if you're in the prophetic camp, the Baptist camp, the Seventh-day Adventist, whatever. It's something that I think we all need to grow much more in, is in sonship. Not even from the perspective of, like, where we have this hierarchical mindset of, like, gifting and, placement of the fivefold ministry, but just for the fact of understanding how God the Father looks at his children. Mm-hmm. You don't ever look at your kids and go, oh man, this one's, can't wait to kick this one out. They're screwing up,
right.
Like, gosh, go get one time I remember I lectured my, 7-month-old niece about how she needed to get a job. She did not like me for 3, days.
Yeah.
She didn't even compute, and I was completely joking. I was like, you've been in the womb for 9 months, you've been in the earth, you've been walking around, crawling around for 7 months. It's time for you to start pulling your weight. And she just looked at me and started bawling. But, like, we act like that's, like, God towards us. And I felt bad for those few days because I was like, I was just joking. I didn't even think you understood.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But she understood.
Yeah. But there's opportunity for maturity on both sides, right? So at the beginning, when you're launching out with the Lord, there are moments where it's like watching your kids try to learn to walk, right? So as when you see your kids, like, all they have to do when they first start to try to pull themselves up and walk, if they fall forward, you cheer them as if they've done something amazing. Right?
Because they've done something.
Right. And you want to encourage them that the action that they've taken to this point will lead to more complete action if they just keep going.
Yeah. And
so there's this on-ramp process of, even as you start to discover, man, this person has it in them to walk. Right? And they can feel it. It's coming to the surface. You're not telling them you need to learn to walk. It's actually built in. It's inside of them, and there's a desire that's starting, even at the chemical level. They just know what they're capable of. Mm-hmm. Now think about that for a while. Think about how many people it's been built in and hidden and invested in them, that the Lord himself actually knows what they're supposed to do, and they start to pick up on it, whether we ever tell them about it or not. Right? But then when they start, they know what to do, right? But all of the world, all of the enemy, the systems of the world, our flesh, it all wants to derail us from that thing. But inside is hidden the seed of image, the likeness of a personality and attribute of God that wants to come out. And our body, our spirit even knows that it's supposed to come out, right? But we just need, when we're just beginning, we need so much encouragement. We need so much help. We need propping up. We need, hand holding because we're wobbly as we're taking the step. But over time, the maturity process of both the person that's gaining confidence in being able to take the step into something new, but also the maturity that's required from the parental side in that situation of knowing it's time for me not to put my hands on them last week, having my hands right there holding both of their hands was the right thing. This week, maybe I hold them with one hand or maybe with one finger, or maybe I step back 2 steps because they have it inside of them to be able to walk this thing out without me at this moment. There's a maturity and a sensitivity at every stage of progress and development that is required both on the person that's trying to step out, and also the person that's helping to oversee the growth process. And like you said, we don't, imagine how many prophetic words and help we needed when we were first getting started, right? But now I'm at the point where if I never get another prophetic word again, I'm not changing my direction. I'm still moving towards the Lord. I'm going to grow towards the Lord. But it is a huge bonus when they come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Right? Like I am super happy. I don't, in that sense, I don't need them to happen. I don't need something externally to help confirm it or motivate me. I'm still going to press in. I'm going to try to be obedient and faithful to the things that the Lord has spoken to me, that he's entrusted to me. But man, it's a huge bonus and just a little marker. Like it's almost like a little love note from the Lord when somebody from the outside comes along and goes, "Hey, blah, blah, blah. I felt like the Lord wanted you to know this." And you're like, it's amazing because he's giving you something beyond your needs. He's actually starting to meet you in the area of your wants and your desires. And sometimes I think we get stuck in, from a poverty mentality, we're only supposed to ask God what we need, and he's only going to answer us if it's a true need or something that has to happen.
Yeah.
When he's up there as a father going, not only do I want to meet you in your basic needs, not only do I want to prove my faithfulness to you, but above my faithfulness, I want to show you my overwhelming goodness. And that goes far beyond just, this is what you need to hear during this moment. This is, man, I might tell you something that you don't have to do anything with, but I just wanted to talk to you like I talked to a friend. And man, there's no telling how many times I'd misinterpreted or did not understand that the things that he was sharing with me were not things that I needed to go do something about.
Yeah.
That they were not things that I needed to turn around and try to help make happen or help avoid to happen. It was just simply that in the relationship that we had developed, he considered me to be a trustworthy friend, that he just wanted to share things sometimes. And I completely missed that the point was just intimacy with each other, because I was project focused still on, man, there must be, if he's telling me there must be a reason, a part that I'm supposed to play, I must be, supposed to do something. Let's go get some people and let's have a, whatever. And let's do this and that. And I missed just the fact that he wanted to have intimacy with me and show another layer of his love to me, not so that I could do anything or not because of what I could do with it, but simply because of who I was and who he is.
It's interesting. As we're talking about this and as we're just kind of discussing it, it's like I can almost still perceive some of these questions. Like, you guys are talking a lot about identity, sonship, intimacy. What's this have to do with the prophetic?
And it's everything. Absolutely exactly. Everything.
And I think that's when, if we kind of goes back to, I think, to some of the conversation that really kind of sparked between you and I, of going like, when we over spiritualize something, and it's like we've put the prophetic so far up here. I gotta make sure I keep it in focus here. That's how I do that. We keep it so far up here above my head. But like in the most simplest form, I like to do stuff for the common denominator. Is the prophetic is hearing God and then sharing it. And God's speaking all the time, but then we make like the prophetic is like something grandiose, and it's like, and it's always this big, gigantic, like, if you could become spiritual enough to achieve this, like, and it's like, no, like, he wants to talk to you. But like how you see all this, what we would probably just call stuff, plays into how he talks to you. And we don't realize that, like, it all plays into it. It all plays into how you see the Father, dictates how you perceive him speaking to you, and it becomes a filter that everything comes through. And some of our filters are so thick or so dense, we don't realize that we're missing huge parts of the message. We're missing huge parts of what he's really saying to us because we have these really dense filters that prohibit things coming through. It's kind of like, think of, like, the most natural form you could think of is like a coffee filter. Like, it's water could still come through it. But if you put enough coffee grounds in there and pack it in there, eventually water won't come through. Mm-hmm. Brad has just joined us.
As Bob would say in that sense, it's time to take a flush.
Exactly.
That's what he would say about that. If it gets too packed up here, then it's time to take a flush because we've gotten too smart for our own good, and we actually won't allow God to come out because of all the knowledge and wisdom that we have packed in there.
Well, wisdom.
Human wisdom.
Yeah, it's human wisdom. What seems right to men, and oftentimes it clouds our judgment. It clouds our perception to hear the Lord, and we hear amiss. We hear something that I for sure believe that's the Lord. Like, well, is it? Like, what's clouding that decision process? It's kind of like the more can actually hurt you in some cases.
Yes.
And it's learning to differentiate between what God is speaking to you versus your knowledge, which comes back to part of that being in integrity, which I think was the initial point last week.
It doesn't matter what you label it; it's still mixed in there. So
everything's, it's all together. A cookie's a cookie. It doesn't matter if it's the butter, the sugar. It's a cookie.
That's it.
We should just call it Cookies with Wesley and Steven.
Whatever. I'm up for whatever, man. I'm along for the ride with you, and I trust you to lead us to a positive.
I'm depending on you. I just make pretty pictures.
Then we're doing great. So, but yeah, I mean, you're right. There is all right. So I would liken it this way, right? I still regret the day that I took the bait of this phrase. You can reach for something better than God loves you. All right. Now in the prophetic, right? Because we want to reach higher, better, faster, longer. The kingdom is always ever increasing, ever expanding, then to grow in it, right? We feel like whether we talk about it consciously or not, we all have this, what I call a revelation scale.
Yeah.
Right. And there's this scale, like, trance is above a dream and angelic visitation is above this, and then all these kinds of things. And so we have this ranking order. And if we really think that the kingdom works that way, then we miss the intimacy that comes from the still small voice. Because as friends, right, if you had to shout or wave a flashing billboard and, get a circus of monkeys and elephants to come out to get my attention.
Right.
Versus if you could whisper, then my sensitivity to you shows where I'm at if you have to shout at me versus when you can get me to respond to a whisper.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I remember the day where my grid for that was shattered and it just made sense. Mm-hmm. It made sense. And I remember, like, I was out of town, but Brad was teaching in the school, and I walked in at that moment, and Brad was talking. He goes, "I remember the day like the Lord sent an angel to speak to me," and I thought, "Oh man, I was so holy," or all in the way that Brad's watching. But as Brad would explain it,
sure.
And I remember walking in on that moment and hearing he goes, but that wasn't the same as the still small voice. We've created this hierarchical system of how we hear God, and we've put these things above the voice. And all of a sudden, it was kind of like this, like where you just everything comes through your mind at once, and you realize like this systematic way of over spiritualizing some things, and I say the word I always call it over spiritualizing because we've put these things above just him, and everything just like I was like, it's all been backwards. It's all been backwards for so long.
Yeah.
And it's like, but then I like even remember things of like, in Numbers where it's talking about, if there's a prophet amongst you, that I'll speak to him in a riddle, a dream, a dark saying, so on and so forth. But not to Moses. I speak face to face as a friend speaks to a friend.
Yeah.
And it's like, I've taught about this. How did I get it so confused?
Yeah.
How did, and it's so easy to like, we're calling it what it is, right? One sells books better than the other.
Well, I mean, yes, because in our culture, it
sounds cooler.
You have to use more and more extreme language to be relevant.
Yeah.
Right? So if I don't take the bait, I won't be relevant.
Yeah.
Right? Because I'm actually going to end up being eventually persecuted from both sides, because the religious people will think I'm lawless, and the lawless people will think I'm religious. And if I start to get feedback on both sides, I know I'm getting close to where I'm supposed to be with the Lord.
Is that the secret?
Both sides? For me, I can't speak for you, man. I can only speak for me, buddy. That's just, I know, because I know that we know the temptation is you can have the Lord speak a real whisper to you, right?
Yeah.
And if you write a blog or a paragraph or whatever, and you say, the Lord whispered this to me today, right? You'll get some people that respond to it, right? But if you took that same detail and you wove it into a more mystical story, then you're going to have people resharing how amazing it was, even if most of what's in there is human knowledge with a little bit of the Lord, and you've extrapolated it and turned it into a fish story. The number of people that are going to pay attention to what the Lord really whispered to you is going to increase. And so the Lord is allowing it because it's driving us off of a cliff. This is what's happening in the prophetic stream and all that kind of stuff. That he told me one time, there's one of the other layers of why there is safety in a multitude of counselors is because sometimes they'll all tell you different things, and you'll be driven so crazy you'll actually have to come ask what I have to say about it.
100%.
Right?
I tell people all the time, like, if you put 3 like IT people in a room and ask them one question, you will walk out with 30 answers.
Right. And then you'll either have to the Lord is not schizophrenic, right? So
come on.
He's not bipolar, he doesn't change his mind every day. But if you listen to what people are saying the Lord is saying, you will think he is very unstable during this time. Right? But again, the Lord is the most consistent, stable, steadfast, faithful being that's ever been created, right? So if we're seeing instability, is it on his part or is it on our part? But what it's doing is it's delivering us, because fundamentally we say that everyone can hear the Lord for themselves. But the way that we've set up the religious systems is we still hear better than the common man. So if you get stuck in your personal life, you still need to go find somebody special that can do it better for you.
Just hold on a second. because I'm like that. What would you say to like? I think people are so afraid of missing it, so afraid. But I think there's so much grace in like functioning out of faith. You know, it was once said to me, well, if you knew, it wouldn't be faith.
Yeah.
And I think God responds to the faith in the situation more than the accuracy.
Right.
Because he's going, at least you're doing something and you're trying to hear me.
Yes. The people that you don't think are missing it are missing it. Right? So does it matter whether you think you're missing it or you don't think they're missing it? We're all missing it.
Whether you think it or whether you don't, you're right.
It doesn't really matter because it's not according to how we score ourselves or how we score other people. It's how it is reflecting the Lord, right? So ultimately, there's a story of this exuberant young guy. He was so full of faith. He just wanted to accomplish stuff, and he saw a guy in a wheelchair, and he felt that faith, tenacity rise up, and he just goes over and he starts praying for him like the barn's on fire, and he just all of a sudden he yanks the guy out of the wheelchair, right? Stand up and walk, right? And he pulls him out of the wheelchair, and they both go toppling over into a heap right on the ground, right? The guy can't walk any better than he could before the guy started praying. It takes a few people to come and help the guy back into his wheelchair, and the man that was all exuberant and passionate about it, all of a sudden is feeling all kinds of shame and guilt, and he's apologizing to the guy, and he says, man, I'm really sorry. I thought this was something that, I was supposed to do. I really thought it was the Lord. And he goes, man, don't worry about that. That was the most excitement I've had in a couple of years.
For a minute, I thought you were sharing my story.
Oh, man, it might have been your story. I don't know.
No, because I had a similar situation where somebody gave an example of a word of knowledge. Like, it was like, first I'd ever heard about a word of knowledge as, like 15 years ago, 16 years ago. And it's like nowhere near as common as what people act like they are now. And it was like, you're going to go to church tomorrow, and there's going to be a woman you've never seen before, and she's going to be in a wheelchair, and you're going to go up to her and say, rise up and walk in the name of Jesus. So I go to church the next day. There's a woman I've never met before, ever. ever. She's in a wheelchair. And I have the mic. I am like, this is the golden opportunity of the Lord right here, right now.
Yeah.
And I tell, like, so I got saved in a Korean church. And so I didn't, like, I had to tell, like, the English speaking pastor, like, this is what, and they're like, if you have the faith, go for you. And I was like, you bet I do. Yes. I mean, like, they gave this example yesterday, and here we are today. Yes. And I have the mic. And so I go, and I share my little bit, and then I go and make a beeline for this lady that's sitting in a wheelchair. And I walk up to her, and I'm like, in the name of Jesus, rise up and walk. And then all the, like, we're super zealous bunch of young folk at the time. And, like, we all flock to her, and we're like, and throwing fireballs and all, whatever you can think of. And and we're going for it. And then someone picks her up, takes the wheelchair away. She can't stand. She kind of falls on the ground. She's crying. She doesn't speak English. She only understands Korean, and none of us spoke Korean. And
what a weird day.
Right.
For her. I mean.
For her. For me. But, it, in the end, like, and I felt embarrassed.
Sure.
And the senior leadership of the Korean part of the church were going to have me make a public apology for it. Right. But our pastor for the English portion of the church said, I'm not making him apologize. When was the last time you tried anything like that?
Yeah.
It's just like Peter walking on water. When was the last time you're going to walk on? When was the last time you walked on water?
Yeah.
People go, "Oh, he sank." When was the last time you took 2 steps? I'm afraid to take 2 steps on frozen water, let alone liquid, wet water.
It shows you that we're more. It shows you that we're more. Ultimately, we ascribe more power to the devil to deceive us than the Spirit to lead us and guide us into all truth.
Yeah, it's a whole nother story.
And I mean, but fundamentally, I want to give an exercise to everybody that's
Homework.
listening out there. Yes, a little bit of
Due
homework
next
here.
Tuesday.
That's right. We want to hear some stories. I'll leave it to Wes to give some of the comments, but when we talk about being able to hear him, in the form of a whisper or the still small voice, right? The voice of the Lord. That's not just in our alone time, our devotional time with the Lord. I would encourage you to be able to pick out the whisper of the Lord in the conversations that you have with other people. And I don't mean just the good conversations that you have with other people. I mean in all of the conversations that you have with other people, because even if someone's yelling at you and they're frustrated, if you capture the voice of truth that's speaking to you in that moment, then it doesn't matter what else is being projected at you if you can pick out the voice of truth in the midst of all the other voices that are in there. And so there's a settling that takes place, that you can endure things, that you can be happy and joyful in circumstances where you shouldn't be, because if you allow yourself, if you attune your ear to the Lord speaking in the midst of whatever form that voice is taking, then all of a sudden the enemy has no place anymore, because it doesn't matter what the enemy is doing. You're still focused on what the Lord is doing in spite of what the enemy is doing. And if there's anything that we need during this time, we have to be able to pick out the voice of truth in the midst of the chaos of all the other voices, because those other things that may seem good, those other things that may seem right, that we may be justified, we don't want to be like the Pharisee that comes to Jesus wanting to justify himself, right? And so we want to be careful that we're not coming to the Lord telling him how well we protested this thing and how well we stood up for being able to have church meetings over here, and how well, we made sure that we told the government we don't like what you're doing. We need to make sure that instead of trying to justify ourselves during times when we're being squeezed, we actually pick out, what are you doing in the midst of this? And I want to speak to that thing and cause it to grow, not talk about all the things that aren't the Lord. And I'll tell you one of the funniest stories about people trying to grow and mature in this prophetic thing was, this guy gets huge credit in heaven for allowing this story to be told all over the world year in and year out. But a student of ours, we went out and did these things called faith courses. And we used to give them different assignments, like go to the bus stop and prophesy over, 5 people at the bus stop, and, pray for healing for, just different things that, and, pick out a needy family and buy provisions for them, just different acts of service, different ways to grow and exercise your faith, right? So there's this guy, and he's with a couple of other people on his team, and he goes down to the bus stop in Charlotte one day, and he's a little bit nervous about, stepping out in this way. So he's kind of hem-hawing about, different people, and he's not sure he can lock in on stuff. But all of a sudden, he finally sees this lady at the bus stop, and he feels like he has a word for her, right? So we all know how this goes when you're just doing this for the first few times. Oh, yeah. Hidden camera footage would be pure gold if we ever get to rewind some of that stuff once we're in heaven and sit down and laugh with each other. But he goes up to the lady and says, ma'am, my name's so-and-so. I just have a question for you. And he goes, do you have any children? And she says, no. And he says, would you like some? And then, based on the look on the lady's face, he realized that he had basically propositioned someone at the bus stop. And so he in that moment of fear and trepidation, he didn't know how to talk himself back out of it. So he ran away.
Good call.
Right? He saw no salvaging this burning car wreck that was happening, and so he just took off. And he ran away, and he was horrified, right? Rightly so. I mean, you know how it goes. It's like, no, that's not what never mind. I'm not not a shady character. That's not what I was trying to talk about. And the reality is he probably had something from the...
Whoa. He's back.
Sorry, you got me back?
Yep, you're back. You're popular.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Sorry, phone hit. So anyway, so we get to the place where he's basically feeling really bad about it, and he's basically apologizing to the Lord. Just, I'm so sorry. I missed it. I don't know what I was doing. I'm not good at this, and all this kind of stuff. And this picture pops into his brain of the Lord belly laughing in heaven at him. Right? Mm-hmm. And as soon as he saw that picture, it completely broke all of the shame, all the condemnation, all the guilt of making a mess of it. And it gave him an understanding that the Lord wasn't mad at him for trying. Yeah. Right? And like 2 hours later, he gets this second chance moment. The next word that he delivers to a person actually causes them to want to give their life to Jesus, because he actually took a second shot at it after the first shot was just a disaster. But he felt the Lord cheering him on, going, you know what? I love you when you make mistakes, and I love you when you have successes, and my love doesn't change no matter which one it is. If you'll just keep trying to reveal my love to people, you will see an impact in allowing people, which is really that John 12, if I be lifted up, I will draw all men unto myself. And so our only part to play is to try to hold him up the best way that we know how. And sometimes we'll do a good job, sometimes we'll do a bad job, but holding him up is the key, because it releases it. It's like us volleying the ball back to his side of the net that says, okay, we've taken this and we're hitting it back to you, knowing that you can make something out of it. And so we're going to do the part that only we can do, and then we want you to do the part that only you can do, so that we can come together and make something beautiful in this relationship.
One, I feel like I may know this person. Secondly, it's not me. Secondly,
no, it wasn't Wes.
I think like one of my favorite times ever was me missing it completely. Mm-hmm. And it was like trying to get a word of knowledge for a waitress, and I felt like I heard the Lord say she had a issue with her shoulder. No. I'm like, your elbow? No. Your wrist? No. How are you on earth the only waitress ever to not have a sore part of your body on the side that you carry stuff with? Like, how is that even possible? Apparently I found her. Yes. And I remember going, this is an amazing moment that I need to share about on Facebook. So I posted a status about how I just completely missed it. Mm-hmm. And people are so loving. They're like, well, maybe it was for her friend. Well, maybe it's for her sister. Or maybe it's for this person. I was like, maybe I got it wrong. Yeah. It's okay to get it wrong, because you're trying. It's not about like the way, like one, it's not like we're not great. The way that the Lord is looking at us and assessing us is not the way that we're grading each other or grading ourselves. Yeah. It's completely different. And I want to point out the difference of what I said. Assessing versus grading. Yeah. We're looking at pass and fail. The Lord's assessment of us is a little bit more fluid than pass or fail. It's totally different. And it would be incredibly presumptuous for me to say that I fully understand it, because it would go back to 30 minutes ago in this conversation of saying, we understand how the Lord does everything. Yeah. But one thing I can say I've learned is like, he's not looking at us the same way we look at ourselves or each other. No way. That I can say.
We would be dead. We would all be dead. If
We'd
he
all have
looked at
been
us the way we look at each other, we would be dead.
and or like replaced or something.
Lying on the ground suffering from a severe wound. But you're right. There is. But imagine how freeing if we could break down this special feeling of you have to be part of a special club to get to here. Yeah. If people that other regular people, I don't even know, there's terrible terms out there, but the common person in a church, the normal, typical church attendee, if we broke it down to where the people that they considered to be in a different level or category owned their misses as well as they owned their makes, how much relief and how much of a decompression would take place where everybody would go, man, if they can make mistakes, I'm willing to try. And that's really ultimately what I would like to see in the way of accountability, in the way of starting to break down and really unify even the prophetic community and prophetic voices that are out there. If I could say anything, it would be, man, if we could just break down the barriers of entry to make people feel like you have to get to a certain level to get started, or you have to reach a certain maturity level in the Lord to be able to understand his heart. That would be the key thing that I would try to break down and just encourage people that everybody out there that you think is amazing in hearing the Lord's voice is still making mistakes and also being successful, but they're learning from their mistakes and they're not allowing it to cause them to get spun out, or they're not willing to, throw away everything that they know about the Lord. When they make a mistake or when they quote unquote fail, they're able to process it, land on it, and go, man, that was crazy. I don't want to do that anymore. And then you pick yourself back up and you keep on moving. And that is truly maturing in the prophetic, is knowing that what he calls failure is not what we call failure. Mm-hmm. The only thing that he calls failure is if we quit.
Yeah.
Because he says, basically, if we keep going, we will reap a harvest. So every time that we continue on, if we haven't reached a successful conclusion, it's because we're not at the finish line of that moment or that season yet. And the only way to truly fail is to quit.
I think that right there is such a walk away point, is like when people, because, with trying to grow in the prophetic, and it's something that I actually really appreciate from Sean Bolt, is he'll openly admit, like, I miss it all the time. Mm-hmm. You only see the highlight reel.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is like, the highlight reel is what people often see. And I think that's even what we miss when we read scripture, because there's a lot that's what's not said.
Right.
But we also know, because people are people, like, there isn't a whole lot of quarreling between the apostles that are actually documented in scriptures. There's some, but there's a lot of, like, combating. You got a lot of type A personalities that are young and zealous in a very, like, confined community. There's going to be some issues.
Oh, yeah.
The idea that we always perceive in unity is much different than probably the unity that took place.
Absolutely.
You're going to have some people that are in the river and some people that are afraid to get into the water. You're always going to have that. And so it's that boldness and that bravery to step out and saying, you know what? God's with me. Yeah. And he's with you in that learning process. He's with you in the learning curve. And his learning curve is so much different than our mindset and the ways that we think. And like, even like sitting back in this, listening to this and kind of processing what you're saying and what I'm saying even. And I'm realizing there were, even in recent years, there's been times where I would probably teach what I said a few years ago completely different today. And that's part of the maturation process. And now the trickery of the enemy would be me to get super down on myself, feeling like I have to take the 12-step program of, go wrong my rights. And but one thing I heard at one point is, the way that I was able to communicate in my earlier years is so much different than how I would communicate now, just like the way that I would have communicated something 6 months ago with the Lord in a continuous growth process may be different now.
True.
There may be things that you believed 6 months ago that you don't believe now, or things you didn't believe 6 months ago that you do believe now. And that's the beauty of God, is He's constantly walking with us and helping us grow, helping us mature. And that's the whole point of these Tuesday broadcasts, is to help, to have an open dialogue about, what's going on in prophetic culture, and hopefully that we can grab a hold of the Lord in some fashion and mature through this, and keeping our affection on Him, keeping our attention on Him. And I appreciate you taking time out of your day. I mean, it's, I know we're in quarantine, so it probably seems relatively easy now, but you also have a family. Like, you were out feeding people in a parking lot yesterday. Like, so there's constantly stuff that's going on. Like, I got to go, downtown and fix some stuff with some computers for people. Like, and it's like, but I think like this is needed.
Well, this is what we both love, though. I mean, there's nothing better than for people to have the opportunity for the light bulb to come on that says, man, I'm not gonna be paralyzed by fear anymore. I'm not gonna be stuck. I'm going to actually walk this thing out with the Lord. Success, failure, anything in between, the relationship is the key. And I want to serve my fellow brothers and sisters with the gifts that the Lord has placed inside of me the best way that I know how. And really what we're describing is getting outside of yourself, getting rid of self-preservation mode, and being willing to extend that love that says, I'm going to lay my life down. Sometimes I'm going to lay it down well. Sometimes it's going to be very messy. Sometimes I'm going to kick and scream even as I'm going down to get myself to, but the point is that it's, obedience is better than sacrifice, right? That's what the Lord says. And so above all, us individually being obedient to what the Lord is asking us to do, and to be free of judgment and criticism on how He may be asking someone else to do it differently than He's requiring us to do, will ultimately lead to some of that unity of the body coming together, knowing, man, you have a piece of the puzzle, and it doesn't make your piece better or worse than mine, but your piece is essential and my piece is essential. And we're never really going to see very clearly if we're not allowed to all bring our pieces into the puzzle and see how they fit together.
Yeah. I mean, it's, we all have something to add to the equation.
For sure.
And that's, even those who are watching have something to add to this equation.
Absolutely.
It's not just about Wesley and Stephen. It's, what do we all have to this? Because it's, as comments come through and things like that, I'm able to like, oh, okay, this is some of the questions that are whatever that are happening. And I encourage people, if you do have questions, put them into the chat, and then like, it'll help guide next Tuesday.
Man, to do a complete question and answer one. There's nothing like this.
I love Q&A. Like, especially in like one of my favorite conference sessions I've ever done was it was all about like global evangelism and crusades and all that, and then I did the business portion of it, in the sense of like fundraising, marketing, branding your content, like how do you go about doing that? Mm-hmm. And I said like 10 minutes of a spiel, and then just sat down and said, what are your questions?
Yeah.
And that was my favorite. It was actually the most raved about session because it's like I just let people pass a mic around. I had no idea what people were going to say.
Dude, Brad and I joke about this all the time. But if I ever want to learn something, have people ask me questions.
Because what's funny is this is why you and I get along.
When the spirit of wisdom and revelation shows up, then if you're just the conduit, man, but you're hearing stuff that you don't know that's coming out for the first time, and because people ask that question, if we realize that what happens in a meeting is more predicated on what the people bring in versus what the speaker brings in, then we would start to capture it. And so I benefit from the people that come in with the hunger that they have, with the dedication that they have. I just simply get to be the guy that's willing to be foolish enough to stand up and allow the Lord to try to come through in a way that meets the hunger that the people have. And I know we're the same way on that it is so much fun when that spirit of wisdom and revelation comes and settles in the realm. You feel like you have access to basically anywhere in the spirit to learn. And not only, it's not you teaching them, it's us all learning from the Lord together.
No, I love it. And to me, that's the whole point of equipping people, is just like helping. You're not just the only one. Like, it's not just about the people that you're teaching growing. Like, I'm growing in the midst of
Absolutely.
that process because it's challenging me. And that's something I've learned from my random jobs that I've had over the years, is I didn't realize what was already inside of me as far as knowledge base until I actually had to train another employee on how to do something.
Yeah.
And then it's, and that was something that one of my early spiritual fathers implemented into me. He goes, it doesn't matter if you're 1 step or 2 steps or 70 steps in front of somebody. It's all about you in that moment of being able to turn back around and bring someone up.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're not relatable, you're not of use to the kingdom, really, because you have to be able to offer and give out what you have in a way that benefits people when they go to work tomorrow and when they go to their school and when they raise their kids. If what you're handing out is not a source of life to sustain them in the next step of their journey, then really what you're giving doesn't have any value. And if what you're giving doesn't have any value, then it's not the Lord, because the Lord is always giving out value. And so we want to make sure that we give out stuff that is relatable and applicable to people that are out there beating their head against the wall, grinding it out, looking for the Lord to meet them in areas that they've never seen him before. And if you tell your amazing stories of things that are happening in other galaxies that other people are never going to experience, then they will come across, say, well, I'm glad it's for that guy, but that's not what the Lord does with me. And then they disconnect from anything that you may be able to share. So absolutely, man, that's if there's anything, is holding your hand out and saying, man, I've been where you've been. Let's walk together, because I know you can see, success and breakthrough in the same areas.
Yeah. Or, I mean, if, I think the other side of that is, you thought you screwed it up? Let me tell you what I did. If you think you're going to have a hard time recovering from that, let me tell you how bad I messed it up.
Look at this scar over here, that's...
Oh, yeah. This one time, it's faux pas and speaking, and because you don't have everything rehearsed. You don't have, and you're just free flowing, and I think that's even what makes sometimes live video hard for people, is because you're just what are you going to do when there's a mishap, or it's like I was, when I was doing the spray paint stuff a week ago or a week and a half ago, part of it is you're using a claw of a hammer to crack open a spray can, and it just splatters everywhere. Well, I missed the can and I hit my finger and I was live and I'm like, ow. But I have to continue on, because I'm I want to stop, and why are you, I was glad I wasn't bleeding, but why did you miss?
Yes.
You know, but man, it's been so good to just, I mean, even though this is the second time, it's been good to do this. I mean, if I don't know if everyone else is getting stuff out of this, but I sure am. Like, you know, listening to Steven and you know, so it's been good for me. This is like hanging out. The only way that this gets better is you're here. And
absolutely, man. I'm good. I like the one-on-one. I mean, hey, this is the real kingdom stuff right here. Is sitting, fireside chat. Just there's nothing better than getting with different people and talking about the Lord. And so really, this is just. I mean, it'd be great if we can invite. If it was possible for all these people to actually be in the same place and have coffee together and all that would be awesome. But it is a really cool opportunity that technology affords us to, you know, just kind of peel back the layers and show real life. This is real life, good, bad, ugly. This is real life, and we're all out there, you know,
trying to do this together.
Yeah,
trying to do this together.
Absolutely, and going towards the Lord and wanting to know Him a little. Today, I want this to be the least that I know Him for the rest of my life. So my heart is that, like you said, next month, you know, maybe 3 years down the road, we go, man, we got to delete that Facebook Live because we were so shallow in our understanding of the Lord. Like, we got to at least laugh at it. Yeah, we got to take that down or put a big warning label over it, like we don't believe this way anymore. You know, I mean, who knows? But that's and the only way for us to get there is not to isolate and try to go alone. It's to be surrounded by like-minded individuals that have a heart that burns towards the Lord. So I agree, man. I get as much out of it as you do, and I'm thankful that we have the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, I'm like, amen for technology.
All right.
So. But all right, so next Tuesday, same time, which is 12 p.m. Eastern time, 11 a.m. Central time, and 9 a.m. Pacific time, and tomorrow in some places of the planet, but not yesterday.
Yes, I think it was like 1 a.m. in Malaysia from what they said last week. So.
Yeah. And it's funny is I've been getting like regular people from like Malaysia, Thailand watching, and I'm like, it's like really late at night. Mm-hmm. Go to bed.
Night out.
Watch tomorrow.
You have room to talk about somebody staying.
Listen. I've been working on that, okay? The other day, I went to bed before 11. I was asleep by 1.
All right.
That's not bad. We're making progress, you know, better than like up till 4 or 5. But that's also because like the Lord's been speaking to me and waking me up at 6 and 7. And so like I'm tired by the end of the day. Like
He'll get you trained eventually.
Trained. I'm all about that late night watch.
Oh man. Too fun.
Jesus help us.
Yes.
But all right, man. I will see you then, and you have a good rest of the day.
All right, buddy. Love you.
All right. Love you too, man. Bye. Again, guys, join us next Tuesday, same time. We're just going to use Tuesdays to kind of grow and mature in the prophetic and walk together in all of this. Maybe we'll bring on some other guests or things of that nature. But I hope that you enjoy this. I hope that you find it beneficial. Leave your questions in the comments. And like I said, it'll help kind of guide as we move forward from here on out. But love you guys. Bless you guys. Have a wonderful day. And we'll talk soon. Tomorrow. Actually, every day at the same time, I'm live. I don't know if you know this. So if you're not following or subscribed to the channel, whether on YouTube or on Facebook, every single day, I'm live at the same time. Monday through Saturday. The only days I'm not is Sunday. We have a couple of guests coming up this week. Thursday, we're going to have some friends from California. Friday, we're going to have a couple of guys, and we're just going to be ministering, and it's just going to be some Holy Ghost fun. Anyways, bless you guys. Talk to you soon. Wait, don't go anywhere quite yet. I want to thank you so much for watching the broadcast today. Honestly, it means the world to me. If you have not yet chosen to follow the page, would you please do so? All you have to do is click like or follow, or there should be like some tab that comes up on the bottom of the video that you can choose to follow for whenever I go live. Or you can hop over to my YouTube page, Love Speaks Ministries, and Love Speaks is one word, LOVESPEAKS Ministries. And you'll find us there. You'll see my mug right there. And of course, you can always text me, 916-249-9626. You can text me if you have a prayer request or anything like that. And I'm pretty good at getting back to people on it. So I would love to hear from you. And of course, you can always visit lovespeaks.info. That's my website. You can read previous articles, prophetic words. You can give or partner or edit all of that if you need to, whatever you need to do. Or you can reach out to me there. It'd also be a link to my store and resources, books, shirts, things like that, all that stuff that's there. Anyways, love you guys so much, and thank you so much for being a part of the broadcast, being a part of Love Speaks Ministries. God bless you, and I love you. I'm out.